This is a last minute edit, but this whole video is going to have a tint and it's going to be flipped because of copyright. Sunday brings forth the most important event of the week, Blue Archive. You know the deal. I stayed off the feeds for the day so I could properly lock into this week's Blue Archive activities completely blind with my friends. At some point, I'll stop leading these videos with that since that's just how it'll be for the entirety of the anime's airing season. But not today. This week, we rejoice at the anime debut of Problem Solver 68, a crowd pleaser and personal favorite for sure. I mean, how can you not love them? Whether you played the game, or watching the anime, or are filthy fucking secondary, if you give the problem solvers their time to shine, they'll cook. Which I think this episode did. With all the basic exposition completely done and out of the way after 2 episodes, this episode is able to get all the meat and potatoes of the game episodes it's adapting and create what is probably the most structurally sound anime episode out of the 3 released so far, and it definitely shows. It's a low bar to pass for sure, but for the record, I am discussing episodes in relation to each other and as a Blue Archive fan. I still think the show and episode for most people is just fine, okay, and that's how I'll feel about it until things really pick up, which may or may not happen, so who knows. The pacing feels just right when compared to the decently slow, exposition-filled episode 1, and the kind of abrupt at times episode 2. The adaptation quality of this episode is incredibly faithful to the source and each scene flows smoothly. Every moment from the source that I passively wondered when it was going to show up did within a very short but appropriate time period. And not once this episode did I feel like a specific scene was dragging on for too long or like the given scenarios lack context they might have when compared to the more elaborate source material. 2 problems I had with the previous episodes to some degree. Nothing like that this time around, it was solid. Obviously, it wasn't a complete one-to-one adaptation, but it didn't do any drastic narrative rearrangements when it came to the main meat and potatoes. They even added some extra scenes. And any longer scenes from the source being trimmed for the sake of TV pacing, it felt non-intrusive and made sense. Genuinely, it feels like they found a good pacing middle ground for this episode, and I'd love it if they kept this momentum going. Most of the episode spells a pretty alright direction. However, it may be because they had less game episodes to adapt this time around, those being Volume 1, Chapter 1, Episodes 7 through 9, which throws a wrench in my calculations, although that's on me for just seeing the adaptation process as raw numbers, rather than considering exactly what each of those episode numbers mean. The structure of the Volume 1 story until the latter bit, and I'd say for a fair chunk of the earlier parts of the other volumes, is relatively episodic. Things happen in chunks with the overarching plot of the volume kicking in later, so I really should have accounted for that, but it is what it is. The adaptation now becomes a matter of seeing how they choose to adapt and split the longer chunks of the volume, which we'll see soon enough. Without a doubt in my mind, Problem Solver 68 stole the show this episode, which is a bit redundant since they were the main focus of the episode, but that's a testament to how good I thought they were. Like with the whole show, I may be a bit biased since I absolutely adore the group, but I think they were done quite well and especially benefited from the medium in a couple of notable ways. For one, I feel as if the anime does a better job of directly building up the group to be considered this cold-hearted top-level threat. The preview at the end of episode 2 does this, as a direct adaptation of episode 7, but so does the prologue and Act 2 anime original scene of the episode, showcasing this grand getaway with cool guy explosions and a cool fast boat, and an overconfident Aru patting herself on the back for a job well done. Much like how she's set up in the source, it creates this aura that may make people unfamiliar with Aru's character, when coupled with her design and the music track associated with the episode's big threat, believe her to be a competent crime woman person, only for that impression to get immediately flipped on its head and reveal she's but a little goober, only helped by the anime's rendition of the game's most popular song. This scene, while brief, dips into the strengths of each of the characters and creates small but relevant impressions that get expanded upon in the next scene. Mutsuki immediately has this teasing playfulness to her from how she talks, both in the substance of her words and the tone of her voice, while Kayoko has the whole fed up with the antics down pat as the oldest of the group. Minor thing, very minor, and not a complaint, rather an observation, but Kayoko's voice, regardless of the context it's here in the anime, it has a bit more boom to it. I don't really know how to describe it, actually. This is such a weird thing to notice, but even on first watch, I felt the difference. I didn't feel this for any other character, mind you. It could be a direction thing, but while her voice maintains the same tone and sound, it's just the tiniest bit different. Perhaps a little more airy, breathy, maybe she's pretty close to the microphone, but it's to the point where I can't really place my finger on why exactly it feels different. Perhaps I feel this way because I've spent most of my fighting game lab time listening to Blue Archive ASMR, so my perspective is skewed. But I may very well just be losing my mind actually. Then again, this is just a point of observation and not a point of criticism. Her voice doesn't particularly fall out of line when put up to expectations regarding how she sounds. She's still very much Kayoko, and her delivery is still very good. It plays well into Act 2's slice of life at ramen, since it explicitly shows how they ended up with no money, rather than just leaving it at that they'd lost a bunch of money and ended up short on change for food and hired hands. The whole scene and its aftermath is great, in the source as well. It's funny, features the GOAT Master Shiba once again. I mean, look at him wagging his tail raring to serve customers in need. And I'll say this since this is one of my favorite scenes in the chapter, the source is done justice in the adaptation, carrying almost everything over from the source. Kayoko and Mitsuki get to have their fun poking fun at Aru, Aru gets to continue LARPing as a hard-boiled criminal boss despite being completely normal actually, and Haruka is Haruka as ever. I don't know how else to put it. Each of them already oozes their own individual charm from the time they're on screen, and their group dynamic is as lovable as ever. Their brief interactions with Abydos so far aren't half bad either, but their best moments are within the group, and it's easy to tell why they're so favored given their wide range of fun personalities. While they for sure need some more time to develop as far as the anime goes, especially since they need to be given interactions with Sensei, they've been given a very strong start. I mean, all I wanted was anime Mitsuki, and anime Mitsuki I got, with her being almost as prominent as Aru when it came to her screen time and speaking roles amongst the group, so I'm a happy camper one way or another. While the main focus of the episode is basically problem solver, Abydos remains the main cast and doesn't miss their fair share of good moments either. While not a favorite moment from the chapter, the roundtable assembly to discuss money acquiring tactics is still a gold moment in the source. I think it was done alright good here, but it's certainly not perfect. It doesn't sit on any one of their proposed solutions for as long as it does in the source, which takes away a little from the individual jokes that come with each of their ideas, but it only makes sense with TV anime pacing and whatnot. While not particularly bummed since I think it was still funny in the show, Serika's pyramid scheme had a whole sales pitch to go along with it, which wasn't picked up in the adaptation. Instead, all of the details were printed on the flyer, but I can't actually read it. The punch is handled quite well, it's just the wind-up isn't as strong. Either way, she was shot down for being a #real hustler. The same goes for the name Swimsuit Gang. They're shown in swimsuits as an idea for an idol group by Nanomi, but the name Mizugidan is never uttered. I checked as I thought it might have been another Anyone translation thing, but it's not. When the name gets repurposed in the next episode, it'll probably be mentioned in dialogue as that's how the anime addresses such information, but as it is, that's the one thing that I feel could maybe leave anime-onlys confused from the episode if it's not brought up again. They'll be wondering where they got such a strange name from. Also, look at Ayane here, she's adorable. This brings me to something I really like about the episode. The animation feels a fair bit more expressive. I say even though some characters were already decently expressive. The range of facial expressions from each of the characters has seemingly widened, though that range was mostly pushed by Aru, Haruka, and Shiriko doing this little pout. There were also more of these simple cutout type frames. I think this is the first episode to use them, and they give the show a more fun and cartoony type vibe, like any kind of comedy anime, more so than it already had. Though I imagine the main reason for them is simply being very cost effective, like why I do these text cards when I either want to emphasize a particular phrase or don't want to edit footage together. I don't know how the anime workflow process works all that well, it may be more of a directional thing, but more of this please. I like the style and it certainly feels quite alive, though it's hard to not notice that there are certain cuts where there's way more emotion in the voices than is expressed in the animation itself. I don't know if that's a props to the voice actors, whom I like, a knock against the animation, which I think is like okay, or both, who knows. And moving along, speaking of the animation and whatnot, the third act combat scene baby. Are we gonna talk about it every time? Hell yes, because I get to see if they animated any new EX skills. This time, just Mitsuki's, although that one's a bit of a stretch. She throws one bomb rather than the whole bag, but considering the logistics of that and how the voice line is close enough to the New Year Mitsuki EX line, I'll count it. As for everything else, it's nothing to write home about. It does a good job of highlighting the combat prowess and coordination of Problem Solver 68, even if they do have a platoon of hired hands on their side, but from a spectacle perspective, it's super whatever. The tactics are whatever, the animation is like whatever, the gun sounds are still plain, and overall it's kinda whatever when it comes to Blue Archive the animation combat scenes, but it does have its highlights, like Haruka being a freak and blowing up Shiriko twice, and Kayoko hitting the nastiest Akatsuki Fire 5C into gunshot string. That was super satisfying to watch all things considered. Everything else is kinda whatever. It's weird since the best parts of the combat scene are when there wasn't as much gun-to-gun stuff happening, which you think would be the opposite. While there's a fair bit of motion in the scene, absolutely more than the previous episode, it feels a bit floaty in terms of the animation. I understand in motion it may be to emphasize certain frames, but floaty is the only way I can describe it this time around. Stuff is definitely happening on the screen and it has some pretty strong key frames, but it's definitely not holding that momentum throughout the entire fight. In terms of pure animation, I do have to say that episode 1 still holds the crown. That shit was really fine. While I don't mind them and I wish they'd be better, the combat scenes are for sure the most underwhelming parts of the show so far, since I hold quite a favorable opinion of every other aspect. I'd love to see that change later on and get some high quality named student on named student combat, rather than the animation being dumped into kicking the shit out of nameless faceless goons, but for now, I guess we get what we get and hope for the future. I will say that the build-up and conclusion for the third act is good though. I just find the meat and potatoes of it to be whatever. Further building character for the problem solver students and allowing them to shine even more. Mainly here at the beginning with Haruka acting all freaky waiting for Aira to give her a title. Sorry, girly, go blow up Shiriko or something. And the resolution is as comically anticlimactic as it is in the source. The punchline to a very elaborate setup. The final nail on the coffin that reinforces the fact that these guys are actually not a big threat at all, as intimidating as they may have seemed at a first glance. A perfect impression of the group given by the anime. The soundtrack adds both a layer of funny to the whole thing since it makes it feel like a lot more of a hard-fought conclusion, and it gives a sense of sincerity to Aru's departing words as Problem Solver begins to run away. The voice acting is also a nice touch here. Aru's voice actor does a great job of giving her that sense of panic, and Kayoko giving a wave in a simple "see ya" is a nice touch as well. It really is nothing personal. I love it. Additionally, this is also where the adaptation moves the talk about Sensei brunting the whole ramen bill, turning a throwaway section from the source material slice of life into a more fitting and good fun ending for the episode. It seems consistent that they want to end episodes on more definitive notes, as in the source material, every episode ends pretty cliffhangery, in all honesty. And following that train of thought, something that feels a bit off this episode is something that's completely opposite of my notes for the other episodes. Sensei took a pretty significant backseat this episode, surprisingly so. He's there for the fight at the end and he's there a little bit at the beginning, but that really is the end of it. You could absolutely take him out of the episode and it would feel the exact same. The outcome wouldn't be the same plot-wise, but it would feel the same. This is reflective of the source material, where the character focus is solely on the two groups of students in this part of the story, with Sensei just so happening to be there at certain moments. But in the context of the anime, it definitely does feel a little weird when Sensei has been made to be far more present than in the source. I just miss him, is all. Realistically, there's no place where you can insert him into this part of the story, as this introductory section for Problem Solver 68 is set up on the string of fate bringing the Abydos students and them together during after school hours before anything big goes down. Keyword being after school hours. Why would Sensei be there? Sensei is a busy man, he's got shit to do. He may be chilling in Abydos until their issue is resolved, but he's got his own stuff to do. While they were out there getting ramen and such, he was probably in his little office room watching YouTube shorts or something. I don't blame him, that boy really knows how to eat at a Korean convenience store. In the end, it's not like him being mostly gone for one episode is gonna kill me. The amount of opportunities he's gonna have to be silly in the future is plentiful. And a last note before we pack it up once again, the next episode previews are a web exclusive thing. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. Fool me a third time, shit. I don't mind since they exist at all, and not having previews in the show itself means there's more time to use the actual episode for actual episode stuff. But it is clear that every episode is going to have a post-credit scene that leads into the next episode. My prediction for the next episode, it'll either be the prefect team office with Akko, Iori, and Shinatsu preparing to descend upon the Abydos district, or Hina already in the area looking around, one of the two, probably the former. This episode's post-credits was awesome, with my boy, the legend, Black Suit getting a voice, and it being Sakamaki Manabu. As a regular patron of the Japanese Blue Archive streams, I know that this man's a pure legend, having a full index on every playable student and absolutely killing it in that Hifumi merch. So seeing him as the voice of Black Suit after being the MC for the live presentations for so long, makes me quite happy for him. He's just like me for real. Wrapping things up, you're never gonna guess how I felt about this episode. I liked it. Nothing mind-blowing, but it was great to see some of my favorite students in animated form. From the short 20 minutes they had, they certainly met my expectations. Another bout of good fun for the Blue Archive fans, and this time it felt like a perfectly cohesive anime episode with nothing up in the air or dragging along. Compared to the previous episodes, there's way less to adapt, so it didn't need to take any liberties when it came to cutting or rearranging content. There's gonna be more content per mini-story segment arc thing though, so let's see if the anime can keep it up. Next time we'll be hitting the black market, the bank, and finally meeting our light Hifumi. It's one of the most iconic scenes in the game, but also a relatively long segment, so best hope they do it justice, but we can only really wait and see. That's it from me, rambling into a Google Doc and then into a microphone once again. Isn't it awesome? The script in this video isn't as long as the episode itself this time. Aren't I efficient this time around? I actually like mainly talking about the episode in comparison to the source material, the game. It's fun and gives me an excuse to reread the story. Once again, I'm open to rereading and sometimes responding to comments as this is a means of discussion. I'm not super on top of things when it comes to replying though, but I do absolutely read them all. Let me start something here. I actually don't know. Let the world know how you feel about this episode. Anyways, that's actually it this time, and you know the drill. Join the Discord for laughs and giggles and Koharu GIF, follow me on X, formerly Twitter, for fun times and gags and incessant Blue Archive and fighting game tweeting, and as always, happy camping, senseis.